Welcome back to Tale of Wonder. There are two types of strength in this world, the kind that shouts and the kind that waits. The kind that shouts was on full display at the annual Beacon of Hope gala. It was personified in a man named Apex Thorn. Jet was a champion, and he made sure you knew it. He was the reigning light heavyweight king of the Apex Strike MMA franchise. A man whose fists were insured for 8 figures and whose smile was worth more. He was sculpted, tanned, and poured into a tuxedo that probably cost more than a car. He moved with a predator's liquid grace, his entourage of agents, hangers-on, and beautiful but bored women trailing him like pilot fish on a great white shark. Jet was the guest of honor. He was a brand. He was invincible. The kind of strength that waits was in the corner by the service entrance, trying to be invisible. It was personified in a man named Rodney. Rodney was not a brand. He was a banquet server, a busboy, brought on by the hotel's catering service for the event. He was in his late 60s, with a back that bowed in a permanent apology and a left leg that dragged, just slightly, from a hip that had set wrong decades ago. His face was a road map of creases, dominated by quiet, weary eyes that had seen far too much and expected far too little. He wore a standard-issue black vest and bow tie, and he was currently polishing a smudge from a water glass with a linen cloth. The room was a symphony of clinking glasses, false laughter, and million-dollar handshakes. Jet was on stage, his voice booming over the sound system, a microphone clutched in his colossal fist. He was giving a speech about, what else? Strength. Strength, Jet boomed, isn't a gift. It's a choice. It's about taking what you deserve. It's about never making excuses. You look at weakness, you find it, and you eliminate it. You show it no mercy. Because this world only respects winners. The applause was thunderous. The wealthy patrons, who had never known a day of physical struggle, nodded sagely. They loved him. He was their tame monster. Rodney, in the back, felt a familiar, dull ache in his hip as he stacked champagne flutes. He'd heard that speech before. Not these exact words, but the sentiment, the brutal, simple philosophy. He'd heard it a long, long time ago, from a boy with furious eyes and a broken soul. A boy he had, in his one great failure, tried to save. The speech ended. The gala resumed. Jet stepped off the stage, basking in the glow of adoration. He was immediately handed a glass of champagne by his publicist, a sharp woman named Carmen. Jet was bored. This part, the glad-handing, was work. He'd done his part. He'd given the speech. He'd smiled for the cameras. Now he just wanted the night to be over. He craved the iron and sweat smell of his gym, the percussive thwack of a fist on a heavy bag. He made his way toward the VIP lounge, his entourage parting the sea of guests. And that's when the night's two versions of strength were set on a collision course. Rodney was moving from the kitchen with a fresh tray of appetizers. He was old, he was slow, and his limp was more pronounced after standing for 3 hours. He kept his head down, navigating the forest of designer gowns and polished shoes. He didn't see Jet cutting across his path, and Jet simply did not see him. An immovable object and an invisible force. Jet clipped Rodney's shoulder. It wasn't a hard hit, but it was enough. The tray tilted. Rodney, with a speed that belied his age, managed to save most of it. But a single stubborn crab puff wobbled and fell, landing with a tragic plop on the toe of Jet Thorn's gleaming, patent leather shoe. The music seemed to dip. The laughter around them paused. Rodney froze. "My apologies, sir. Deepest apologies." He fumbled for a napkin. Jet looked down. He looked at the smear of cream cheese and chives on his $2,000 shoe. He looked up at the stooped, frail old man who was now dabbing at his foot like a frightened bird. A slow, ugly smirk spread across Jet's face. This was entertainment. "Hey," Jet said, his voice loud enough to draw a small circle of onlookers. "Watch where you're going, Grandpa." "Yes, sir." "My apologies, sir. It was my fault." Rodney's voice was a low murmur. He just wanted to disappear. But Jet wasn't done. The predator had found a wounded animal. "My fault?" Jet laughed. "You run into me. You spill your slop on my suit. And it's my fault?" He was projecting now, performing for the small crowd. I meant my fault, sir. I was clumsy." "Yeah," Jet sneered, leaning in. "You were. You're weak. You're slow. You probably shouldn't even be working. People like you're just excuses." He was quoting his own speech. The irony was lost on him, but not on Rodney. Rodney finally looked up. He stopped dabbing at the shoe. His eyes met Jet's, and in that one long electric second, Jet saw something. Not fear, not anger. It looked like recognition. This unsettled Jet. He didn't like being looked at like that, especially not by this nothing. "What?" Jet snapped. "You got something to say?" Rodney held his gaze. "No, sir. Nothing at all." The lack of fear, the utter absence of groveling, was an insult. It was a challenge. Jet's pride, a massive, fragile thing, felt the prick. He needed to re-establish dominance. He pushed Rodney, lightly, contemptuously, in the chest. "Get out of my way. Go get a dustpan or something." Rodney stumbled back, his bad hip jarring. The dull ache flashed into sharp, white-hot pain. He braced himself against a pillar, his face pale. Jet laughed, a short, barking sound, and turned to walk away. His crowd laughed with him. But as he turned, his hand brushed his wrist. His smile vanished. He stopped dead. He patted his wrist. He patted his pockets. His face, which had been a mask of smug amusement, tightened into a knot of genuine panic, quickly covered by rage. "My watch," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. His publicist, Carmen, hurried over. "Jet, what is it?" "My watch, my Nautilus. It's gone." He whirled around. His eyes, like a hawk's, scanned the floor. And then they locked, with chilling certainty, onto the one person who had just been inches from him. The one person who was weak, invisible, and beneath notice. He pointed a finger as thick as a cigar, directly at Rodney, who was still rubbing his hip by the pillar. "You!" Jet roared. The entire ballroom, a space of 200 people, went utterly silent. "You, old man. You took it." This was the setup. The champion, a symbol of strength and success, accusing the invisible, broken old man of theft. The contrast was absolute. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Rodney's eyes widened, not in guilt, but in a kind of profound, cosmic weariness. It was happening. After all these years, it was finally happening. "Sir," Rodney said, his voice gaining a sudden, clear formality, "I do not have your watch. Don't lie to me." Jet strode toward him, his frame blocking out the light. He was the apex predator, and he had his prey cornered. "You bump into me, a little sleight of hand trick you picked up? You think I'm stupid?" "Jet," Carmen, his publicist, hissed, grabbing his arm. "Not here. Let security handle it." "Security will handle it," Jet spat, shaking her off. He loved this. The cameras were off, but the phones were out. Everyone was watching. He was the center of the world. "I want him searched, right here. Right now? Empty your pockets, old man." This was the escalation. Jet's pride was no longer just a character trait. It was the engine of the entire scene. He couldn't possibly be wrong. He was Jet Thorn. His instincts were perfect. This old man was a thief, and Jet was the one to expose him. It was weakness, and he was eliminating it. 2 hotel security guards, looking deeply uncomfortable, began to move toward Rodney. "Sir, perhaps we could step into the manager's office," one of them began. No, Jet commanded. Here, where everyone can see. I want to see what else he's got in there. Probably silverware, a few wallets. Rodney looked at Jet. He looked at the guards. He looked at the ring of curious, horrified, and excited faces. And he did something no one expected. He held up a hand. A frail, liver-spotted hand. But it was steady. That will not be necessary, Rodney said. And he began, with a slow, agonizing dignity, to empty his own pockets. The room watched, in breathless silence, as the sum total of Rodney's life landed on a nearby serving tray. A small, worn leather coin purse. A folded-up bus pass schedule. A single key on a piece of string. A lint-covered, cherry-flavored cough drop. And a cheap, plastic-cased flip phone that looked like a relic from 2005. That was it. Jet stared at the meager pile. This wasn't right. It had to be him. Check his apron, Jet demanded, his voice tight. His shoes. Maybe he swallowed it. The accusation was so ludicrous, so desperate, that a few people in the crowd actually winced. Jet was losing control. He was no longer the champion. He was just a bully. Rodney simply stood there, his pockets turned out, his hands at his sides. He was a portrait of empty-handed innocence. He was also, in that moment, a man who had lost absolutely everything, and in doing so, had nothing left to fear. He had been in this position before. Not in a ballroom, but in a place that smelled of sweat, tatami, and medicinal tea. A place that had been his entire world until it was burned to the ground. You see, Rodney hadn't always been a busboy. Decades ago, he was Sensei Rodney. He was the last living master of a small, unmarketable, and profoundly effective martial art. It wasn't about fighting. It was called Anshin-ryu, the way of the peaceful hand. It was an art of defense, of control, of using an opponent's own energy against them. It was more philosophy than combat. It was based on a deep understanding of anatomy, of nerve clusters, of the precise, delicate mechanics of the human body. He didn't teach people how to break boards. He taught them how to understand the body. His dojo was small, quiet, and more of a clinic than a gym. He helped people with chronic pain, with joint problems. He was a healer. And into this temple of peace, 25 years ago, had walked a storm. A teenager named Jamie. Jamie was not his name now, of course. Now, he was Jet Apex Thorn. But then, he was just Jamie. A furious, abandoned, and terrifyingly gifted kid. He'd been kicked out of 3 foster homes and 2 martial arts schools for being too aggressive. He didn't want to learn. He wanted to hurt. He was a raw nerve of ambition and rage, and he saw in Rodney's gentle art not a way to heal, but a devastatingly efficient way to break. Rodney saw the darkness in the boy, but he also saw profound, screaming pain. And in his one great act of hubris, his one fatal mistake, Rodney believed he could save him. He believed his art, his philosophy, could be the balm that soothed the boy's inferno. He took him in. He taught him. And Jamie was a prodigy. He absorbed it all. He learned the locks. He learned the pressure points. He learned the theory of redirection. But he twisted every lesson. Where Rodney taught control, Jamie saw submission. Where Rodney taught pressure, Jamie saw pain. Where Rodney showed how to immobilize a joint, Jamie practiced how to snap it. The conflict was inevitable. Jamie, now a young man, wanted to compete. He wanted to take this secret weapon and use it to become rich and famous. Rodney forbade it. This is not for sport. He had told him, his voice firm. This is not for a prize. It is for preservation. It is for defense. To use it for glory is to defile it. Jamie had looked at him with a chilling, sudden coldness. And for the first time, he had called his master a new name. You're just a weak old man, Jamie had sneered. You're sitting on a gold mine, and you're too scared to dig. That was the last time they spoke as master and student. A week later, the accident happened. Jamie, desperate for Rodney's most advanced teachings, the scrolls and journals Rodney kept locked away, the ones detailing the most dangerous nerve press techniques, staged a break-in at the dojo. It was meant to be a simple theft. But Rodney was there. There was a struggle, not a fight, just a shove. An old man and a powerful young one. Rodney had fallen, a clumsy, terrible fall, against the heavy oak desk. The sound of his hip shattering was a wet, sickening crack that echoed in the small room. Jamie, panicking, saw his master writhe on the floor. He didn't call for help. He saw his chance. He grabbed the journals. He grabbed the scrolls. And as he fled, he overturned the kerosene lamp used for heating the tea. He left Rodney to die in the fire. But Rodney didn't die. He was pulled out by firefighters, his body broken, his hip irreparably damaged, his dojo and his life's work reduced to ashes. He lost everything. His art, his home, his students, his name. And Jamie vanished. He re-emerged 5 years later on the underground MMA circuit. A new name, Jet Apex Thorn. He had a brutal, unstoppable signature move. A crippling submission hold that nobody had ever seen. A move that attacked the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist all at once. The commentators called it, in a flash of branding genius, the Thorn Lock. It was Rodney's most advanced technique. A move designed to safely immobilize a violent attacker, which Jet had perverted into a joint-shredding, career-ending weapon. Rodney, now a dishwasher, would sometimes see his life's work, his stolen, bastardized legacy, celebrated on a bar's television screen. He watched the boy he tried to save become a monster, built on a throne of lies. And now, that monster was standing in front of him, in a $10,000 tuxedo, accusing him of being a thief. The irony was so thick, so heavy, it was almost hard to breathe. Back in the ballroom, the silence was a vacuum. Jet's accusation hung, unanswered. He looked foolish. His watch was gone, and this old man didn't have it, which meant someone else did, or he just lost it. The champion, the man of no excuses, had just thrown a public, childish tantrum. His face was turning a dangerous shade of red. This was 1,000 times worse than losing a fight. This was public humiliation. He was a fool. And then a voice cut through the tension. "Jet, darling? Oh my God, you're not going to believe this." It was his publicist, Carmen. She was hurrying through the crowd, and she was holding something up. Something that glittered under the chandeliers. It was Jet's watch. "You are such an idiot," she said, her voice a stage whisper that everyone could hear. "You left it on the marble sink in the men's room. I found it when I sent your assistant to look for you." The truth landed in the room like a bomb. Silence. Absolute, suffocating, devastating silence. Jet Thorn, the apex predator, the man of strength and perception, had misplaced his $50,000 watch, and had proceeded to publicly, brutally, and falsely accuse a frail elderly busboy of stealing it. He was not a champion. He was not a winner. He was just a rich bully. Jet looked at the watch in Carmen's hand. He looked at the sea of faces staring at him. Their expressions were no longer adoring. They were a mixture of pity, disgust, and second-hand embarrassment. And then he looked at Rodney. Rodney was just watching him. His face was unreadable. But his eyes were not angry. They weren't triumphant. They were filled with pity. This was the one thing Jet could not stomach. The weak old man was looking down on him. All the PR, all the training, all the carefully constructed charisma, it evaporated. The Jet Apex Thorn persona dissolved, and all that was left was Jamie, the furious, cornered, broken kid from the foster home. The rage was so pure, so white-hot, it was almost beautiful. He needed a target. He needed to break something. What? He snarled at Rodney. What are you looking at? Rodney didn't flinch. He just kept watching. You think this is funny? Jet screamed, his voice cracking. You think you're better than me? You old, you nothing. And he did it. He shoved Rodney. Not a small push. A full, two-handed, violent shove to the chest. It was a stupid, pointless, indefensible act of violence. Rodney, with his bad hip, had no chance. He was not a young man. He was not a warrior. He was a 68-year-old busboy. He stumbled backward. His bad leg gave out completely. He crashed, with a sound of utter disaster, into a server's tray stacked high with empty champagne flutes. The sound of 24 glasses shattering on the marble floor was like a gunshot. Rodney went down. He lay there, for a moment, in a sea of broken glass and spilled champagne, his black vest sparkling with the mess. Jet stood over him, breathing hard, his fists clenched. He laughed, a short, ragged, triumphant bark. See? Weak. He had finally proven it. He had hit weakness, and it had collapsed. He was the winner. The crowd was horrified. This was not a gala. This was an assault. People were shouting. Security was rushing forward. Carmen had her hands over her mouth, her face pale. This was it, the twist, the moment the entire story had been building toward. Rodney lay on the floor. He was wet. He was cold. A small shard of glass had nicked his hand, and he saw a single drop of his own blood well up and mix with the champagne. He looked at the blood. He looked at Chet, the monster of his own making, standing over him, victorious. And the weariness, the decades of weariness, finally left him. It was replaced by a cold, clear, and perfect calm. The calm of decision. This was not a ballroom. This was a dojo. And the final lesson was about to be taught. Slowly, painfully, Rodney used a nearby table to pull himself up. He ignored the hands of the security guards trying to help him. He rose on his own power. He stood on his one good leg, the other trembling. He was soaked. He was bleeding slightly. He looked pathetic. He calmly straightened his skewed bow tie. He smoothed his wet vest. Chet, high on his own adrenaline, saw this as defiance. It enraged him further. You want more, old man? He growled. He grabbed Rodney by the front of his vest, balling the fabric in his giant fist. He pulled him close until their faces were inches apart. The smell of Chet's expensive cologne and the sour tongue of his rage washed over Rodney. I should break you in half. Right here. Right now, Chet whispered for only Rodney to hear. The phones were all out. 100 cameras, recording every second. This was the end of Jet's career, but he was too blind with rage to see it. He pulled his right arm back, his championship arm, the arm insured for millions. He balled it into a fist. He was actually going to hit him. And in that fraction of a second, Rodney moved. It wasn't a block. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't a kick. It was nothing. It was the one move. As Jet's arm tensed, pulling back for the knockout blow, Rodney's left hand, the frail, liver-spotted, leading hand, slid up Chet's arm. It wasn't a grab. It was a glide. It moved with Jet's own motion. A perfect, harmonious redirection of energy. Rodney's index finger and thumb, with the practice of 50 years, found a tiny, almost imperceptible hollow on the inside of Jet's wrist. A precise cluster of nerves. The Anshin-Ryu key, the one Rodney had called the off switch. Jet was tensing for a punch. All his energy, all his power, was focused outward. His entire nervous system was exposed. Rodney didn't strike. He didn't squeeze. He just pressed. A single, firm, educated pressure. The effect was instantaneous. It was not dramatic. It was medical. Jet's entire body locked. His $10,000 suit jacket bunched at the shoulders. His eyes, wide with rage, now widened further in pure primal shock. The championship fist, the one that had ended careers, uncurled. His fingers went limp. His entire arm, the bicep, the tricep, the forearm, went completely, utterly dead. A profound, terrifying, instant numbness. It was as if his arm had been unplugged from his spine. It fell to his side like a length of heavy rope. A collective, disbelieving gasp filled the ballroom. Jet stared at his arm. He tried to lift it. He couldn't. He tried to make a fist. Nothing. He was the strongest man in the room, and he had just been disarmed by a touch. Rodney was still standing there, his hand now resting gently on Jet's shoulder, as if comforting him. He leaned in, his voice a whisper that cut through Jet's panic. "You always overextended, Jamie." The name. Hearing that name, in that voice, hit Jet harder than any physical blow. His blood ran cold. He looked, really looked, at the old man's face for the first time. The creases, the eyes, the quiet disappointment. It wasn't just an old man. It was him. "You were strong," Rodney whispered, his voice laced with a terrible, ancient sorrow. "But you were never smart." Jet's world tilted. The weak old man he had crippled, the master he had betrayed, the ghost he had been running from his entire life, was working as a busboy, and had just beaten him. "That," Rodney continued, his fingers still applying just enough pressure to keep the arm numb, "is the first lesson. The one you skipped. The thorn lock is just a child's tantrum. This is control." Jet was paralyzed. Not by the nerve press. The feeling was already starting to tingle back into his arm. He was paralyzed by shame, by revelation, by fear. Rodney released his grip. He stepped back, a perfect, respectful distance. Jet stumbled, clutching his tingling arm. He was defeated, completely, effortlessly, and publicly. Defeated by the man, the art, and the philosophy he had spat on, stolen, and left to burn. The resolution was swift. The crowd didn't understand the how, but they understood the what. They saw the God King Jet Thorn, the symbol of invincible strength, neutralized by an elderly server. The videos were online before Jet even left the building. A champ Jet Thorn, spooked by busboy? Bizarre confrontation at gala. What happened to Thorn's arm? Jet Thorn as Rodney's elderly hotel worker. Carmen, his publicist, tried to spin it. An old injury flared up. He was disoriented. It was a misunderstanding. But the footage was too clear. The malice in Jet's face. The shove. The raised fist. And then the touch. The MMA world, the real fight world, went insane. They analyzed the clip, frame by frame. That's not an injury flare-up. That's a counter. An old, forgotten martial arts blogger, running a site with maybe 100 readers, was the first to identify it. That's Enshinru, the way of the peaceful hand. I thought its last master, Rodney. I thought he died in a fire 25 years ago. The internet did what the internet does. It dug. The dam of lies broke. They found the old dojo records. They found the police report of the fire. And then they found the connection. An old grainy photo of a teenage boy with furious eyes, standing outside the Enshinru dojo. His name on the student intake form, Jamie. The story rewrote itself overnight. Jet Thorn, champion OR thief. The stolen legacy of Master Rodney. The thorn lock, a stolen perverted technique. Jet's brand, built on the rock of invincibility and no excuses, shattered like glass. His sponsors dropped him in a single press cycle. His Apex Strike franchise was sued by 3 different fighters whose careers he'd ended with a stolen move. His title fight was canceled. His career was over. He was defeated. Not by a punch, but by the truth. Justice had been served. A poetic, perfect, and public justice. But this is Tale of Wonder. And the story is never, ever that simple. Because there is one final, shocking turn of the screw. This is the part that leaves you staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. A week after the gala. The scandal is at its absolute peak. Jet Thorn is in disgrace, facing a mountain of lawsuits and the ruin of his entire life. A young, sharp-eyed sports journalist, a woman named Dana, finally tracks down the man at the center of it all, Rodney. She finds him not at the hotel. He had, of course, been fired for his role in the disturbance. She finds him in a small, clean, one-room apartment above a tailor shop. She has her cameraman with her. She knocks. Rodney opens the door. He is in a simple t-shirt and pants. His hip seems better. He is drinking tea. "Rodney? Master Rodney?" Dana says, her voice trembling with respect. "My name is Dana. The world needs to hear your story. In your own words. About what Jamie did to you. About how he stole your art, your life. How he tried to kill you." Rodney looks at her. He looks at the camera. His eyes are just as calm and weary as they were in the ballroom. "There is no story," he says, and turns to go back to his tea. "What?" Dana says, locking the door. "But he humiliated you. He assaulted you. And you defeated him. You got your justice. You have to tell us. What was it like, that moment? To see him again after all he did? To know you had him? Was it fate? Was it karma?" Rodney pauses. He turns back, a small, ironic half-smile playing on his lips. "Fate," he says, "is just what we call a plan we didn't know we were a part of." Dana blinks. I don't understand." Rodney sighs. He looks directly into the camera, directly at us. "You thought Jet's publicist finding the watch was luck?" Dana's face goes blank. "What?" She found it in the men's room." "Yes," Rodney says, "she did. Because I told her where it was." The camera just holds on Rodney's face. "I don't. Jet Thorn," Rodney explains, as if to a child, "is a creature of habit. He's sloppy. He's arrogant. He always takes his watch off to wash his hands. He's done it since he was a boy. He's left it in my dojo a dozen times." Rodney sips his tea. "I saw him go into the men's room 10 minutes before the confrontation. I followed him. He left. I went in, and there it was. On the sink, his $50,000 Nautilus." Dana is speechless. You found it." "I picked it up," Rodney said. And you were going to give it back?" Rodney smiles. A genuine, full, and terrifyingly intelligent smile. "Oh no," he says. "I took out my cheap 2005 flip phone. I took a picture of the watch, and I sent a text message." "A text? To who?" "To Carmen," Rodney says. "Jet's publicist." Dana's jaw drops. You know Carmen?" "Carmen," Rodney says, "was one of my first students. Long before Jamie, she came to me for her crippling migraines. I taught her the peaceful hand, pressure points. She's been a loyal friend. She's also been waiting 25 years for Jamie to get what he deserved. We see it now, in our minds. The entire gala. A set. I texted her the photo," Rodney says. "And I texted her the plan. He's here. I have the watch. He will come for me. Let him. Wait for my signal. Then you find the watch." The crab puff?" Dana whispers. "An accident," Rodney says, with a shrug. "But a fortunate one. It sped things up. It made him angry. It made him stupid. When he accused me, all I had to do was empty my pockets and wait. My God," Dana says. You set him up. The whole thing. The humiliation. The false accusation. You orchestrated it." Rodney looks back into the camera. His eyes are no longer weary. They are bright. They are sharp. "The one move that defeated him?" Rodney says. It wasn't the nerve press. That was just punctuation. It was just a teacher correcting a student's sloppy form. The one move that destroyed Jet Thorn was a text message. He called me weak. He said strength is about taking what you deserve. He was wrong. Strength isn't about taking. It's about knowing. Knowing your enemy, knowing his pride, knowing his habits. Knowing his habits. And knowing, after 25 years, exactly where to press. So, here's the question. Was Rodney's plan a perfect act of long-awaited justice, or was it the most calculated, cold-blooded revenge? Let us know what you think in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love stories with a twist that makes you rethink everything, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to Tale of Wonder for more. See you in the next video.